Hello students, welcome to the detailed analysis of Maharashtra B, BMS, BBA, BCA and BBM CET. So you just had the first slot from 10 a.m. to 12 noon today, and I also took the test today to just see what the students have to go through in this examination. And I must say the question had a little bit of surprise element, but more or less the experience was quite smooth and I found the paper to be on the doable side. There were some bits and pieces here and there which were a bit of surprise, which could have thrown the students off. Otherwise it was quite a manageable paper. So let's go through the detailed analysis. Today we had the slot 1. I hope this analysis helps the students from the other slots, that is the second and the third slot. So the second slot begins at 3 o'clock today. I hope the students from the second slot are also watching this analysis. So if we look at the entire paper pattern and all the details of this test, the paper pattern and the user interface was as expected. They had told us that there would be 30 questions in English, 30 questions in reasoning, 20 questions in current affairs and GK, and 20 questions in computer basics. The test paper pattern was exactly the same. So we'll discuss the paper pattern, we'll discuss the test interface. We'll also briefly discuss how the entry was, whether it was smooth or not, etc. What you should carry for the exam. Further, what you should prepare for, or what are the important questions that you should prepare for these exams. So as I told you, I just attempted the paper, and if I just show you my cheat code or cheat sheet, basically after the paper I've listed down all the 100 questions that I had in the paper, right? So I'll tell you all the topics and all the questions that I encountered in my first slot. All right, so let's quickly go ahead. First of all, the paper pattern. The paper pattern was as expected. There were 30 questions in English, 30 in reasoning, 20 in GK and awareness, 20 in computer basics. The total number of questions was 100. The total time duration was 120 minutes and there was no sectional time limit. 1 mark for correct answer, there was no negative marking, and there was no calculator. Now importantly over here, dear students, you should understand the entry and the entry into the hall and all those experiences were very smooth. In fact, I reached my center at 9:45 and the gate closure time was 9:30 a.m. Yet the center, the CET authorities were very cooperative. But if you are aiming to get into your paper, I don't want you to get into a panic situation. So please plan to reach before the gate closure time. I would recommend that you reach 30 minutes before the time. Carry your photograph. Even if you do not have your photograph, CET authorities will take you inside, they will make you fill up a form and you would be able to take the test. So do not create any kind of panic before the paper. Even if you do not have any other things, they are very accommodative. They will allow you to sit and fill up an exception form, which kind of will allow you to go through the exam, and they would look into the issues later on. Okay, so go ahead with the exam. The experience, the entry experience was very smooth. My center was in Kurla, Shah and Anchor Kutchi Engineering College. All right. Apart from that, the user interface. Well, the user interface for this paper was very smooth. The sections were well defined. You had a drop down at the top where you could select the section. The order of the sections I already was the same as what I've written over here. So you had 30 questions, you had English first, then reasoning, then GK and then computer basics. The 4 sections appeared in the same order as they have been mentioned over here. All right. So this was about the order of the sections and the user interface. Very simple and smooth. You had the option to zoom. I did not find any glitches in the computer or the PC or the hardware that I was using. Now let us go ahead to the section wise analysis. Before we go ahead, one more thing. The sectional time limit and the total time available. Now this year, as we had discussed before the exam, 1 week before the exam I had published a video where I told you about the time limit and do not expect the paper to be extremely easy, etc. But in the first slot, I can tell you the time was excess. Most students were done with their paper in almost 70 to 80 minutes. Most students were sitting idle for 40 minutes in the exam hall. So you would not have to worry about the time limit in this exam. So let's go ahead and understand if there is any last minute revision or questions that you can go through to improve your score in the subsequent slots. All right. So moving ahead, yeah, the test interface was smooth. The sections were in this order. There was a drop down to review, select sections, and you had mark for review option. So there was a checkbox at the top of every question where you could select whether you want to review this question later or not. All right. Now moving on to the first section, the English language section. The English language section was, full of grammar. There were grammar questions. There was logical reasoning. The level of difficulty of this section was very, very easy as far as the reading comprehensions were concerned. These were 5-6 line passages. The 5-6 line passages had very straightforward direct questions. There were no inference based questions. There were no main idea or something questions. Very direct. One line was given in the passage. There was a direct question. Sometimes there was a fill in the blanks question also. So the reading comprehension, 2 passages which had 10 questions, these were something where you could not lose any marks at all. Apart from that, there were questions on grammar. For example, the English language, or there was a question wherein there was a sentence and there was a fill in the blank. You had to fill in the correct article, and the. Very straightforward. I think these article based questions were quite easy. Similarly, there were questions on active and passive voice, direct and reported speech. So all these kind of questions were also quite manageable. All right. So you had active reported speech, active passive voice questions. Those were 4 questions you could have managed. Subject verb agreement questions, and neither nor, either or, no sooner than, or hardly did I do something, when something happened, those things were tested. So those could be a slight shocker for some students, but if your basics in grammar was good, or if you've done your grammar well, I think these could have been managed. So there were 5 questions on parts of speech. There were 2 questions on vocabulary. I can tell you one word which was difficult. So ubiquitous, right? So that was one of the questions that I came across in VA. Ubiquitous. So ubiquitous was a word, and what is the synonym for that? So that was the only difficult word that I encountered in my entire paper. Apart from that, if I go through the paper, there were questions on subject verb agreement. There were questions on directed and reported speech, converting direct speech to reported speech. There were a couple of questions on phrases. Now guys, basically we already know how to identify adjective adverbs, but the surprise element in today's paper was that they'd ask you which this phrase is an adjective phrase or an adverb phrase or something like that. So if we just study grammar as parts of speech, adverb, adjective, etc., sometimes this could seem to be a surprise element for students. But if you prepared well, honestly, you could have managed through this quite easily. I found the section level quite easy. Honestly, with you could make 1 or 2 mistakes here and there because there were the type of questions, 2-3 questions was slightly new, but still with common sense you could have managed them. I found the level of difficulty of this paper to be easy. You could have attempted all 30 questions. Maybe you would have some doubt in that vocabulary question, or maybe a couple of grammar questions, but you could have attempted at least with 50% confidence and gone ahead with the questions. I would say a good score in this section would be 28. 28 is something that you should aim for in the verbal ability section. Similarly, coming to the reasoning section. Now, reasoning section had a decent number of math questions. There were 8 questions of QA, which were from time, speed, distance, which were from percentages, simple and compound interest. There was one very difficult question on counting the digits. For example, a question had, if I were writing 3,000 digits, how many page numbers will I be able to write, or something like that. That question was very difficult. Apart from that, the QA questions were quite manageable. If you prepared for QA, generally out of the 8 questions of QA, you could have managed around 6 to 7 questions. That was about the QA section or the QA questions in reasoning. But apart from the QA, the reasoning part was quite manageable. You had series and analogy based questions. We had enough time. So generally in reasoning, people make mistakes because we have limited time. But if you could have, if there were a few 2-3 difficult or moderately difficult questions, you could have managed those by kind of giving them extra time. And therefore I found that the 30 questions of series, or the 30 questions of reasoning, were quite manageable again, right? There were series and analogy based questions, quite manageable. Coding decoding was very straightforward. There were no tricky coding decoding. +1 +1 +1, standard +1s, or standard +4 +2, -1 -2, or something like that. You could have easily decoded those. There were family tree questions. Now, something in family tree, what we teach in class is that you should not assume the name of a person, or you should not assume the gender of a person based on the name. But in this exam, there was a question where there was maybe a Sandesh or Sandeep, some word given, and it was assumed to be a male. So be careful about that. If there's a name, and if it is a very common Indian name, you can maybe assume the gender if required, because there was no cannot be determined option. So I believe they had assumed the gender. So that was one thing that I found different. Apart from that, there were specific questions. So there was one series based question which had symbols involved. So it could count into visual reasoning, it could count into maybe series, but there was a square, square and a dot, square, square, dot, square, square and a question mark. So I basically either that question was very, very easy and it should again be a dot, or maybe I am not aware of something which is very complicated based on that. So overall the questions were quite easy. Venn diagram had a question where they had given you swimming, badminton, and maybe one more sport, swimming, badminton, tennis, or something like that. And basically swimming, badminton, tennis do not have anything in common, so their Venn diagram should be a straight independent circles, so something like that. Then there were calendar based questions. 26 January 1996 was some day, 26 January 1997 would be what day. Now, a common mistake in such questions that students could make is that they would not consider the leap year, but it would be a leap year from 96 to 97 when it's from 26 Jan to 26 Jan. So one had to go 2 days ahead. So calendars is something that you could revise. Visual reasoning was very basic. There was one folding based visual reasoning question wherein they had given one sheet of one diagram, and if you fold it into 4 halves, or half and half, 2 halves, so how would it look after folding? So those were the kind of questions that you had. Directions question was very easy. It was a simple 10 15 meters north, then you go in the east, then you go in the south, then you go in the west, so where you are with respect to your starting positions, all these kind of questions. There were 2-3 chain relation based questions in family tree. So that is something that could be a little tricky, but yeah, manageable again. Time, speed, distance, basic questions. Time and speed are given, you had to find time and distance are given, or speed and distance were given, you had to find the time taken or something like that. In one case, in both the cases it was distance. In one case, time, distance and time were given, and you had to find the speed in kilometer per hour, which were quite manageable. No proportionality or no difficult concepts had to be applied in time, speed, distance. A couple of questions were general miscellaneous questions. For example, to be alive, what should one have? To be alive, and one of the options was heart. The answer to that question was heart. Yeah, to be alive, one needs to have heart. So that is something that you had to kind of figure out on the go. Overall, the sectional difficulty was easy for me. I would say, yeah, barring a couple of questions, you could have attempted almost all. So 28 would be a good number of attempts. Maybe 26, 27 is a good score that you should be aiming in this section. So 27 would be a good score as per my understanding. Now moving on to the third section of the exam. The third section was current affairs and or basically general knowledge and awareness. Now in this section, again, the section was, even if someone would not have prepared anything, I can tell you, I have not prepared for a lot of GK for a lot of time, and I could easily answer almost 12 to 13 questions. So even without preparation, a student could have answered 12 to 13 questions in the GK section. The game or the game changer here is someone who has prepared. So how do you prepare? For example, there were questions on national parks. There were questions on volcanoes. There were questions on the official language. There were questions on the longest coastline. Then there was question on maybe history. who was the king at the time of Afzal Khan's attack on Shivaji or something like that. Okay, so those kind of questions. Current affairs was very limited. You had only 2 questions of current affairs and 18 questions was static GK. So basically the major emphasis of this exam was static GK and not current affairs. The current affairs question were from 2 things: satellite launch by one of the, so they had given one satellite name and who had launched that, so that was difficult, and who won the US Open in 2025. Now that is a very easy current affairs question. Someone who has prepared for current affairs would kind of at least go through the tennis championships, Olympics and sports events of the last 1 or 2 years. So US, the only catch over here was it was US Open 2025. Sometimes students could make a mistake of answering US Open 2026. Okay, so 26 has not yet happened, so yeah, it has to be 25 only, right? US Open is the last Grand Slam of the year. So US Open 25 was won by whom? Okay, and the names were also very common. Carlos, Alcaraz was there, Medvedev was there, Zverev was there. So it was difficult guessing. All the top players were there. But yeah, if you are in touch with the tennis activities, you would have known the answer. Or maybe it would, if you are prepared for it, you would know the answer. Okay. There were questions, very common questions, basic, direct questions as to what is the hardest material. So that's diamond. Or what kind of a disease is Parkinson's disease? Is it a cardiovascular disease? Is it a neurological disease or something like that? You generally can't prepare for that. These are common awareness or general basic knowledge based questions. Okay. Or which sport is the term hat trick associated with? All these things were asked. There were world days also, World Food Day, or all those things. So you can revise your world days. You can revise all the national things of India, because there were 2 questions on national song and national animal of India. So those things can be revised. Longest coastline, the state with the longest coastline, maybe you could expect further questions. States with the largest population, state with the highest land kind of area, all these kind of questions can be expected. Or states with the most number of neighboring countries, states with the most number of international border, something like that could be expected. Apart from that, who was the writer of national song? That has been in the news for a long time, Vande Mataram and all. So those were tested. GK had one question on what is the device used to measure temperature. So those are basic device and knowledge based questions that you could have expected. Therefore, I'm telling you that there were some questions where you wanted knowledge. For example, what is the, there was a volcano name given, and that volcano is in which country? Generally, Indonesia, Japan are quite volcano prone countries, so could be one of them. But yeah, if you would have prepared or read about it, you would know about it. Otherwise, you wouldn't know about it. There was something about Indravati National Park. There was basically National Film Archives of India is located. The headquarters are located in which city? So those could be some bouncer questions which you can expect not to answer. That's why I found this section to be moderate, easy to moderately difficult. Without preparation, you should have scored 13. But if you have prepared, your aim should be to score around 16-17 marks in this section. Your good attempts would be 17. And yes, even if you have prepared well, generally 16 plus would be a very good score in this section. Okay. And moving on, computer basics. Now again, students make a mistake commonly that they prepare or they go ahead with computer assuming that they know computers, but computer requires specialized preparation because they ask you questions on history and inventors. For example, in the computer there were questions related to history and inventor, like who invented the mouse, or the design of computer, or whatever. So how was the design of like the origin of internet is inspired by what thing or something like that. So those invention, in history and inventor based questions were there. There were questions around basics of networks and this thing. So basically, what is the interconnection of various networks called? Those are very basic questions. Some are very obvious questions. Some questions might require your other understanding. Okay. There were questions on basics of operating systems, softwares, drivers, etc. What is the connection between the hardware and the computer users, and some couple of other questions related to those things. There were a lot of questions related to RAM, ROM, memory, etc. For example, which is the memory which is used to erase only, or there were questions around which one is the fastest and the most which one is expensive, or basically the primary and the secondary memory, whether the primary memory is faster, more expensive, etc., something around that. Then there were questions around instruction register. What do you mean by instruction register? What do you mean by cache memory? So all these things were there. So if you have prepared for it, there are certain things which we assume we know, but when it comes to a question in the exam, the options sometimes become so close, it becomes difficult for us to differentiate what would be the correct answer and what would be the wrong answer. So that's why you should generally go through the basics, at least basics of history of computers, basics of networks, basics of softwares, the architecture of computer, what is the CPU, etc. Okay. And there were a couple of questions on shortcuts and abbreviations. Those were very easy, especially the shortcut. What is the shortcut to select everything? That's Control A. So those kind of questions were easy. That's why I say, even if you wouldn't have prepared for this section, you could have scored around 10 to 12 marks quite easily. Okay. However, the level of difficulty of this section was easy to moderate again, or closer to easy if you have prepared. Mind you, when I say the section was easy, that is keeping in mind that the student has prepared for this section. If you haven't prepared for a certain section, you'll always find it challenging, or you'll whatever you do, you'll score decently well, but you'll not score as much as required to top the exam, or to get into some of the top courses of the college, of the entrances. So here the sectional level, the difficulty level was around easy. Students could have attempted around 18 questions, and maybe good score would be around again 16 to 17. Okay, so 16 to 17 would be a good score again in this section. And then basically we'll go ahead to the overall analysis. So if you look at it, English was a section where you could have attempted all. Reasoning, maybe 28 to 29. So basically this number is 28 to 29. So this would be 28 to 29. And again, the other sections, so time taken was not a constraint at all, right? English, you could have attempted 30 questions in 20 to 25 minutes. Reasoning, you could have attempted 28 to 29 questions in around 30 minutes. GK, you could have attempted 17, 18 questions, 10 minutes. Computers, you could have attempted 17, 18 in 10 minutes. If you add this up, it adds up to around 75, 80 minutes. You still would have got 40 minutes. So time is not a constraint in this exam, guys. Go with a very clear mind, be calm, be composed, and make sure that you are able to deliver whatever you've learned and whatever is asked. Just make sure that you don't end up making silly mistakes because of speed, because speed is not tested in this examination. The ideal order, I attempted the paper in the order in which it appeared, because the time is not a constraint at all. So attempt the paper in the same order as it is appearing, or maybe you can complete the GK section first or the current affairs first. But the order of sections was this, and I went ahead with the same order in the exam. I don't think one should get into any other complications around this part. Lastly, good scores. I believe to get into NM College BMS, I hope all of you know that NM College has reduced the number of seats through CET this year. So NM College BMS, I would expect a good score of around 90. See, I have to be on the safe side, so maybe it could be around 89, 90, but 90 is what I expect. 99.8 percentile could be the cutoff for NM College. Jai Hind BBA, Jai Hind BMS, 99 percentile, 99.5 plus percentile would be expected. Around 89 marks, 88 marks would be required for Jai Hind BBA and BMS respectively. MAH.B BMS might require around 98.5 percentile, which would come around at 87, 86 marks. So these are the expected scores. Don't focus too much on this. You have to deliver based on your preparation. For those who have already completed the exam and trying to understand what needs to be done next, BMS through CET, the next step is going to be cap round. So if you are applying for BMS, you do not need to do anything else on the Mumbai University portal. But as I told you, NM and MAH.B have only kept 60 seats now through CET. The other 60 seats are now called BCom in Management Studies. These would be offered on the basis of 12th boards. So basically what you need to do is, for all the courses of Mumbai University, that is NM College, MAH.B College, Jai Hind College, you have R.A. Podar College, you have Hinduja College, NL College, KES College, all the Mumbai University colleges, Wilson College, and everyone else which is affiliated to Mumbai University, you need to apply in 2 steps. For Mumbai University other courses, mind you, I am not talking about BMS. BMS application, so for CET, the next step is cap round, and cap round would happen after the CET result. We are talking about BAF, BFM, BCom, BCom in Management Studies, and all those courses of Mumbai University. For that, you need to apply on the Mumbai University portal at the earliest. There are 2 steps involved. First step is pre-registration, and that pre-registration needs to be completed now. So make your profile on the Mumbai University portal now. The course registration and the college applications would happen after the 12th result. So as of now, you just need to complete the first step, pre-registration on the Mumbai University portal. Those students who also wish to apply for HR and KC College BMS, please note the admissions can be done through CET also. But if you want, you can also try HCET. HCET basically is their own entrance test for this BMS course. And if you take the HCET, the better of HCET and Maharashtra CET would be considered for the admission process. Right? So I hope you found this video helpful. If you are going to take the Maharashtra BBA BMS CET in the subsequent rounds, just go through the kind of questions that we discussed here. And if you've already taken the exam, don't think too much about it. Complete your pre-registration for Mumbai University and complete all the other exams and registration processes. Don't miss any deadline, right? Subscribe to the IMS IPM BBA Prep YouTube channel. So subscribe to this channel so that you keep getting these updates and all the other analysis videos also. All right. So I hope this video was helpful. Before I end, I think I'll just take up a few questions also, because I was told that there would be some Q&A as well. BBA Prep YouTube channel. So subscribe. So I'll just look through the questions, and if anyone has posted any questions, maybe I'd want to take that up. Okay. So if you have any questions, I'll not be able to look into the older ones. If you have any questions now, maybe I'd be happy to post, take them up and answer for you. So if you have any Q&A, please keep asking. So how do I check the chat? Yeah. कौन सा कॉलेज सिलेक्ट किया है क्या? Still without mocks till then, yeah, but I don't know. 65% is also decent score, not bad. What are your mock scores? Okay, this is all internal chat. Yeah, anything else? Have they calculated they need some calculated they need 110%? How can we do rough work, like where? Rough work, yeah, good question. So for rough work, the sheets would be provided. Please carry a pen or a pencil to the center. They will only provide you with the rough sheet. The pen and paper, the pen needs to be carried by you. They will provide you the sheets. They provide the material for rough work, yes. 65 पे percentile कितना बन सकता है? Well, it's too difficult to predict percentiles after 80s, for in my opinion, because after that it will be very there will be a lot of students. The percentiles would change very quickly after every score. But around basically around 85 plus would be around 98 percentile is what I expect. Okay. Beyond that will be difficult to predict now, and we also need to wait for other slots. Maybe I have predicted on the basis of my experience in the slot 1. There could be something, the experience could be different for other slots, right? Yes, Subhada, they provide paper for rough sheet. The word ubiquitous was from IMS mocks. Well, thank you for letting us know. Ubiquitous, I can't even pronounce it so well, but if you knew the meaning, maybe I hope if you've taken the test, you answered it, or if you're going to take the test, maybe you find a word which you get a word which you know. Which calculator is allowed for St. Xavier's entrance? I think the basic calculator is allowed, Ananya. The key area for English is going to be grammar. You need to work on your grammar a lot. Just look at the number of questions from grammar. So if you look at the questions, this is from grammar, this is from grammar, this is from grammar, this is not from grammar, this is again grammar. So you had 8, 6, 6 and 5, 11, 11 and 5, 16 questions from grammar. So grammar is something that you need to, be on the top of your game if you want to ace the CET, right? Reading comprehension, I don't think you need to prepare. Very easy. Sitter, you can't afford to lose marks in these questions, because these were like one-word questions. 6 lines, a passage of 6 lines only. Ambedkar is a bibliophile. What kind of a person was Ambedkar? And there was bibliophile. So it was that easy. Okay. So RCs, you don't need to do anything. You need to work on these things. These are the marks that you need to work for. Vocabulary, generally, it's very difficult to change now. So these are the 16, 17 questions that you need to kind of make sure that you don't lose marks. And grammar is something, even in a day, you can kind of improve. Okay. Was PNC there? No. Dishant, there was no PNC. I have my exam tomorrow, so what should I revise? For English, you should revise grammar. For LR, you should revise. So if you look at the LR section, had heavily relied on coding, decoding, series analogy, family tree, blood relations. So these are some things that you could work on. And basic arithmetic. So basic, percentages, basic formulae. You could just do the basics of these 2-3 chapters. Maybe that could help you if you want to identify topics which you want to revise. Okay. I believe for NM Mithibai, so someone is asking how much would be needed for NM Mithibai. As I told you, NM Mithibai, I am expecting, so this is slightly on the higher side, just to make sure that, I don't commit to a lower number, but I expect around 88 to 90. So all these colleges, top colleges, I believe, you would need a score of around 87 to 90 to get into some of the top colleges. Okay, we can't say this with a lot of confidence. You can't predict. These are just first impressions. This comes with a disclaimer, guys. Please do not take any hasty decisions based on these predictions. These are just first impressions. Detailed analysis after all the 4 slots maybe, would be better. In fact, after the exam, the CET releases the answer key and the question paper, everything. So we will be able to, get a detailed analysis, based on the response sheets that they release. Okay. Will there be a paper analysis for second batch, second shift? Unfortunately, we only will be doing the first slot analysis because we were appearing for this paper, and this should give you, I think, unless there is a very major change or a drastic change, there will only be a reel or a short around that. Otherwise, this is the detailed analysis for Maharashtra BMS CET. So after the second shift and the third shift, if there is any major change, maybe, we'll just publish that through a small video on our channel, but that won't be a live session. What was the question on SICI? It was a basic question on SICI. Rate of interest was given, principal was given, and amount was given. You had to find out the number of years. So it was a very simple one, quite manageable. You just had to use the formula SI is equal to PNR by 100, or whatever you call it, PR T by 100, etc. The formula that you use. Okay. Just motive, if you just go through the question video and you take it behind, I've discussed the kind of questions that had come in the GK section. So I think you'll find that useful. How many math questions? There were 8 math questions. It has already been covered in the section wise analysis. So you can go through the section wise analysis. All right, guys, I think most questions. Okay, Shaurya Doshi has asked NMBMS rest seats through 12th boards. Yes, you are right, Shaurya. So the remaining seats of NM Mitibai College that are through CET. So 60 seats are through CET, 60 through CET, and 60 are through 12th boards. Those 12th board seats will not be called, they will not be called this thing, BMS, they will be called BCom in Management Studies. So that is the name, the change in the nomenclature. Okay. Right, guys, I hope this video was, Silogs was very straightforward. That was very easy. And Silogs, just remember one thing, the question that I encountered, it was given all all blue are sky or something like that. And so if I just look at the all green are blue was the statement given. And one of the conclusions was some blue are green. So they are drawing conclusions from a single statement also. So that is something that you need to be mindful of. Okay. All right. I think most of the questions. How many maths questions? What type of questions in GK, SI, CI, BMS? How much do you need for BMS? Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. That's all for today. I hope you found this session helpful. All the best for your Maharashtra CET exam, and please do subscribe to our channel for more such updates. All the best.